Well, good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Good morning, everyone. If we can please have a moment. Thank you. Members, if you can please make your selections on your tablet. We have Chair, we have a quorum with 14 members present and 1 member absent.
Thank you very much, Clerk. Let's begin with non-agenda public comment. This provides 2 minutes for anybody who would like to comment on something that is not on today's agenda, but is within the purview of MTS. Clerk, do we have any non-agenda public comment?
Yes, we do. At the moment, we have 6 public comments. Udo Wan, if you can please make your way to the podium.
Good morning, board members. My name is Dr. Udo Wan. I have lived in San Diego County for 42 years and have welcomed the Blue Line trolley, especially going to downtown from Noble Station. Although the building is named the Nobel MTS trolley station, there are only 2 floors of 5 that MTS riders may use. Those are almost completely filled. Those 3 floors are marked for retail only. Those are about 350 spaces. The only thing is there are signs there for no parking and you could get towed. I spoke with the La Jolla management and they will not budge to allow any more parking. SANDAG suggested that I bring this to your board, even though the regional transit roadmap calls for better accessible public transit. I was a participant of those workshops representing Surfrider Foundation San Diego and our climate action program. SANDAG and MTS have been pushing for less vehicle miles traveled, yet why they cannot seem to figure out a way to allow for more spaces for riders is really puzzling to me. The surrounding ground lots have many open spaces, yet those are also off limits. This must be addressed, please, and remedied. Perhaps funds from taxpayer-funded Transnet or other funding sources can be assessed or accessed rather to work out the improved agreement with the La Jolla Village management to free up spaces for trolley users. There are many workers, visitors, and Padre fans and others who would really welcome a change to this situation. Go Padres.
Peter Suchi to the podium, please.
Good morning, board. Our president from United Taxi Workers of San Diego, Mikhail Hussein, couldn't be here this morning, so he asked me to address you. I just wanted to alert you that we have a new grant. We're working with FACT on a SANDAG grant. It's an Access for All grant, and the intent of this 1-year grant is for us is to see what parts of the MTS wheelchair accessible vehicle policy we could implement. This policy was passed by the board in 2023. It has a lot of ideas. We're going to try and unwrap the realities in San Diego that hinder the use of WAV taxis and make them more useful to people who need them in San Diego. We'll come back from time to time to brief you on our update. A year isn't a long time. One of our big ambitions is to improve operations at the San Diego airport. So this is your policy. I represent people in the taxi industry. We have wheelchair accessible vehicles as taxis, but they don't operate very well in an on-demand fashion that we think we should be able to do in the city of San Diego and the San Diego County in the 21st century. So I thank you for allowing me to introduce this to you, and I look forward to reporting good news to you in 2026. Happy holidays.
Charlotte Iradifana.
Good morning. My name is Charlotte Arachna. I'm a student at the University of San Diego going for my master's in peace and justice. I have been an on-and-off resident of San Diego since 1990 and have always been disabled. I do admit things have gotten better, but I do think that there is a failure in being able to see things from the scope that I have to see them from. When the latest ride I can catch using your paratransit is 2 minutes after my lecture ends and I got to make a mad dash down there and quite possibly fall, doesn't quite work out. Or when you're telling me that that time is late as you can pick me up, there's still buses that run. And on Sundays, I can't even leave my academic residence because there is no paratransit available. I am trying to become more marketable for this kind of area, to look at the areas that people don't see because they're just blind to disability rights. They're 35 years old. We need to look at them through the eyes of our parents, through the eyes of the stranger, and look at the fact that anything can happen to us at any time. You know, I had a stroke 20 years ago because the doctor hit the blood vessel during brain surgery. I didn't see myself here. And the fact that I'm still alive is a blessing. I don't have kids, but I do find it a mission for me to speak out for those who cannot speak for themselves. And so I do ask you to pay some more attention to the accessibility of people who, whether it's that they don't have arms or legs or eyes or even the will to speak for themselves, to try to look things through their perspective. Thank you very much and happy holidays.
Gary Johnson, if you can please make your way to the podium. Gary, we'll go ahead and bring a microphone to you.
Testing. How you guys doing today? I'm not happy. Are you guys with the bus and the trolley or just the trolley? I'm not happy with either. I can't get in the buses. The ramp's too small. Bus drivers get upset. I'm tired of their attitudes. Trying to get from point A to point B in a graceful manner. And I just don't understand it. They make good money. Must they break their ass out of the chair to help me out? It's bullshit. And I'm tired of it. My car broke down, so I have no choice. Because I still have to continue with my life. Trolley is another joke. Ramps don't come out. Push the button, the doors don't open. Have to go down the next stop. What's up? How much money do you guys spend on these trolleys? You can't make them operational. Take the green button, put it somewhere else, and put the handicap button somewhere else. If somebody pushes the green button before I push the blue button, the ramp don't come out. I got 10 seconds. How am I going to make it to another car? You know, your drivers need to go to customer care, I guess, other than driving that. I've been into driving for a long time. I moved household 15 years. You know how much customer service I had? Because I had a tip. That's maybe what you guys need to do, these drivers, so they'd straighten their attitude up. Put a tip jar out there. Maybe they'll be more caring. You know, I have to unhook myself because it seems like he doesn't want to get out of the chair. I busted my ass in this wheelchair over at Linda Vista Marina because the ramps or whatever where the yellow pads are at, so I know where they're at because I have to go backwards. I can't go forwards too well, and there's no pad. And I dumped myself and I hit my head on the fence. Do you think I enjoy that? Do you think I enjoy being in this wheelchair? Maybe you guys should
Your
go
time
take it
has
for a month.
expired, sir.
I'm tired of this crap, you know? I paid money to get on this trolley or the bus, and I shouldn't be treated this way. You should treat people with respect.
Your time has expired, sir.
All right, you guys have a good one.
James Kim.
Good morning. My name is James Kim. I work for the city of National City for over 20 years as a graffiti abatement, senior graffiti abatement technician. Lately in the past, 20 years of doing the MTS from 24th Street and Civic, I've just been going down there twice a month to do the removals of the graffiti that goes down the line. And what I'm doing for the past 20 years hasn't been working. I just do it as a Band-Aid, and next, within less than 24 hours. It's like I didn't do anything out there. So we're coming up to this opportunity right now to work with a nonprofit organization called Vision Culture Foundation, who's helping us with one of our city buildings, Public Works, doing murals. And one of the murals that we've done has been completed about a month and a half ago. And the other part, the second part of it is, unfortunately, it falls on MTS, territory. And that's where we're having a little problems with trying to get that done. It's a lot of red tape that's been going through for on the MTS part of it that we definitely, need to, figure out how we could do things a little bit easier so we could finish the project at 24th and Civic. I know these guys are trying to do a great thing. They did a really good thing for our community, but apparently with a lot of policies that MTS has, it makes it a little bit difficult for them to accomplish goals and to beautify our community, not just in the city, but in the rail line as well in 24 Civic out there putting murals up there. I just want to be able to see if you guys would be able to be more, transparent, more lenient and more proactive about helping these mural, projects happening more in our community. And thank you for your time, guys, and looking forward to working with you guys in the near future.
Richard German.
Name is Richard German. Is it okay if I play my speech on my Dynamo?
When I am waiting for the ramp to deploy, the driver doesn't give me enough time. Therefore, the doors close on me. I think you should put something on the ramp that alerts the driver or the door to stay open so wheelchair users do not have the doors shut on them.
Thank you.
Gray, if you could please make your way to the podium.
I am Gray. I took the bus today to get here because I figured that parking would be bad, because everything here is pretty bad. I am not able to download the app, and I had to use a card even though I brought exact change because the last time I used the bus, they were asking for exact change. But not everybody has a cell phone or the ability to download an app. Not everybody has the luxury of having a bank account that has enough money to pay for a card. I also was hoping to get a day pass, but I was not able to. The entire bus system is not very efficient for this city. And many people use cash or can't hold on to a card because of theft and other situations that happen. There should be a better way to do this. That's it.
That concludes public comments, Chair.
Thank you very much, Clerk, and thank you to everybody who provided public comment, particularly those who, for whom it took a considerable amount of effort to be here today to provide public comment, and we appreciate you sharing your experiences with us. Director Bush.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Merry Christmas, everyone, and really appreciate the folks that came out to let us know what's going on and share experiences, and just ask that staff have someone follow up with them so we can kind of understand better and work through these issues. Also want to thank our National City employee, James Kim, for coming out. He's a project manager on the mural project. If you all remember, about a year ago, our city manager came out to introduce the project, the concept, the mural project on the 24th Street trolley station and the surrounding buildings in that area, with the intent of replacing a lot of the blank walls and facades with murals so that we can save money, city public resources, and time. So we've been very proactive. I really want to give a special shout out to Rolando Montes for his last name is Montes, right? Yeah, Rolando Montes. He's one of the directors at MTS, and so he's been proactive in coming to the meetings and been really diligent. But in this, so we did get started. This will be the city building has been a success so far, and that's just the first phase of many phases. But the MTS side of it now, I do feel like it is stalled. And I would just ask MTS staff to please work with our city, work with the nonprofit Vision Culture Foundation to kind of expedite things more, because now we're having to spend more city resources on abating the graffiti. And there's been a month and a half gap since the city finished their side of it. And I know there's, process and policies and sometimes things happen, but I think this is, I just feel, and from what I've seen, it's been kind of more bureaucratic, and I think there was ways that MTS staff could have been more proactive. So I just ask that staff take another look at this. I know this project is going to be complete. This is the first phase of many. There's always projects that where this happens, but I do think this is an opportunity to, if we're experiencing this, and if I've experienced this, some of these challenges, then I know it's a bigger issue, and sometimes it speaks to our governments, our culture sometimes of just stalling and just kind of getting complacent. And as a board member, all of us need to be accountable to the public. All of us, we should work together, because this is a good thing, not just for MTS, but for the city of National City. So I just ask for Sharon if we can continue to work with this, and thank you for being diligent and communicating with me about this. But I just ask that we continue to move forward and make some more progress on this and try to get this done before the end of the year.
Thank you, Director Bush. Director Elo Rivera.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to say thank you to the folks who came and spoke. Sharon, I don't know if you have a response for folks who are struggling to access or just anything that we heard, because that is concerning to me, that folks who depend on our services are trying and not feeling like they're able to actually access.
Yeah, I'll have staff speak with the public commenters before they leave this morning. And so we have Mike Wagon is here for the bus side, and Brian Riley's here for the rail side, so they can talk to them.
I appreciate that. I'm not going to push this too much, but I would like to know, just as a board member, if one of the members of the public who spoke today came up to me and expressed that frustration, I wouldn't know how to respond to that. And so for myself, and I'd want to respond to that. So what should we know about folks and the ability to access?
We maybe a year ago gave a presentation to the board on access services. That's one way we could bring it back to the board, is do another annual report. We have our ASAC committee, which is another forum for these.
I'm not going to get into a whole thing here, Sharon. I'm just going to say I'm super frustrated with that response. I remember the presentation. This is like a practical issue. We're having like someone show up. We're having folks show up and say that they're having a hard time. I know what the presentation said. What I'm asking about is on a day-to-day basis, when someone is trying to access our service and isn't able to, how are we responding to that? And so,
well,
it's fine.
These are non-agendized public comments, so
understood.
that's why I haven't provided you.
Understood. And I don't know that I don't know that's entirely inappropriate for us to ask if we could just simply understand what we as board members should tell someone when they're trying to access our service. The last thing I'll say is I am also curious, the National City effort that's going on, that sounds like not just a great addition for National City, but anyone who's riding the trolley it's one of those things that enhances the experience. And as cities are trying to improve quality of life, work with MTS to do that, anything that we should know about barriers that are standing in MTS's way from the city side, please tell us, because we want it to be as easy as possible for these ideas and this work to actually be felt in the community.
Yeah, and we've been working, as the speaker had mentioned, Director Montez has been working directly with the nonprofit to try to get this to happen. We have requirements under the Public Utilities Commission to have safety when anybody is entering our right of way. And so we have to have a permit process that allows for that. We've offered to give for free the power down and the people who will be the flaggers within the right of way. What we were waiting on is the insurance from the nonprofit. They asked that we waive it for them, but on that note, that would have provided MTS with no protections against liability in the event that something happened to one of their workers in the right of way. And so we have been trying to work with them to help them figure out what to do with their broker to get that insurance. And Board Member Bush just told me today that they've secured the appropriate insurance. And so we are at the ready to process the permit and get the scheduled power down and the scheduled people to do the flagging in the right of way. And so I understand that public commenters can come out and say, that we are not helping, but there's a lot of backstory here that because this is not an agendized topic,
Understood. Yeah, I think just from my perspective on that, the reason it piques my interest is I want to know what we need to do as cities to know at the front end of the process, especially when we're working with external partners who have limited resources. What do we need to have in place from the jump, so that time and effort and their precious resources aren't dwindled down, trying to navigate a process that might have been easier to navigate if they knew about it on the front end. So happy to hear more about that afterward. Obviously, Member Bush is more than capable of dealing with this on National City's behalf. I'm just thinking about it from a kind of broader perspective as we try to, again, enhance the community through partnership with MTS. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you, Director Euler Rivera. Director Foster.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And thank you to everyone that came out. I just wanted to share a few comments as I listened to the comments about graffiti. And I can appreciate the standpoint of municipalities or agencies having to expend additional resources as we're going through the necessary processes. But I just want to add a different perspective. I think for me, I do a lot of work in helping those that are dealing in certain lifestyles and to transition. And one thing that I can tell you, and my district borders National City, but I have been driving my district this past week. I am seeing an uptick in graffiti and specifically gang graffiti. And I just can't stress the importance when that type of graffiti is going up, as we can talk about concerns of beautification, quality of life. But I do want to make sure that MTS understands that the graffiti can result in actual community violence. And so I think we need to keep that in perspective as we are addressing these issues, because I can tell you that I myself in our district, we have had violence, we have had homicides directly resulting from graffiti. And so I don't know what other communities experience in regards to this, but it is something that I take very serious. And I actually have a staff person totally isolated to going out and addressing graffiti, and I am seeing the uptick. So I just want to bring that perspective to make sure that we are doing everything we can to expedite and to make sure that we are doing everything we can to mitigate those types of, I'm going to call it defacing of public property and certain things because it can get very, very dangerous. So just want to make sure we all understand that. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Foster. Director Downey.
I have a question on the speaker that talked about the parking at the Nobel stop. Whenever SANDAG sends somebody over here, that makes me sad because we're just shuffling things. So just for my education, I'm pretty sure we have an agreement that we are have a contract for 2 floors in that building. And that's the reason we can't have any more. I realize it's an off-topic matter, but I'd love some information afterwards just to understand that.
Well, I can tell you that the Nobel parking situation is the biggest complaint we get. And MTS was not privy to the closed session discussions about the negotiations for the property with the owners of the mall. We would have liked to have seen a lot more parking there. Since then, we've tried to negotiate with the mall management to try to get more, to lease more parking there at the mall. And they have given us a resounding no. So unless for some reason we could eminent domain, there's not much you can do with a property owner who's unwilling to negotiate.
When you mentioned closed session, so who did those negotiations? Is that SANDAG?
When SANDAG was acquiring property for the Mid-Coast extension, they were dealing with the property owners themselves.
Thank you so much for that information.
Thank you, Director Downey. All right, let's go ahead and move on to our consent items. The consent agenda includes items 3 through 11. Clerk, is there any public comment on the consent items?
We have no public comments, Chair.
Okay, is there a motion to approve? We have a motion to approve from Director Hall. We have a second from Director Moreno. Any further discussion on the consent items? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Members, please make the selections on your tablets. Chair, the motion passes with 14 members voting yes and 1 member absent.
Thank you, Clerk. Item 12 is an action item on the state and federal legislative program, and Julia Tuer is going to lead this presentation.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair and Board. So I'll be reviewing the draft 2026 legislative program today. I'm joined by Mark Watts, MTS state lobbyist, and Peter Peyser, our federal lobbyist. They will both be providing updates a little bit later in the presentation. So the purpose of the program is to guide our advocacy efforts. It's not meant to be fully comprehensive. Staff will bring back any key specific legislative items as needed throughout the year. We'll also continue our partnerships and collaboration with other regional entities and key stakeholders on MTS related priorities. So I'll begin by reviewing some highlights from the legislative program. The entire list of priorities are included in the attachment for today's item. So first, under transit funding, I'd like to highlight that we'll be supporting legislation that generates new revenues for transit projects and operating costs. We will support increased levels of funding and favorable policies during the Federal Surface Transportation Reauthorization process. And we will seek subsidies for specialized fare programs that are supported by the board. And one new program I wanted to quickly highlight that should be coming forward next year is a free transit pass program issued by the state. So once additional information is released, we'll be working with SANDAG and NCTD to apply for regional funding toward the YOP program. MTS will seek funding and resources to help those experiencing homelessness throughout our system. We will support state, federal, and other agency efforts to help address issues of climate change. And we'll be supporting any legislation that provides funding incentives for mixed use and/or transit-oriented development projects. Under public safety, We are consistently looking for ways to not only keep our passengers safe, but our employees safe too. So we will continue to advocate for legislation that provides funding to public transit agencies for safety and security operations. And under regulatory matters, we will work with the California Transit Association, CTA, to engage with stakeholders and potentially pursue changes to axle weight limits to reflect the shift to zero emission buses. This would provide vehicle manufacturers and transit operators more time to comply while improvements in technology are being made to the vehicles. And then the program also includes a point to support any legislative effort that provides the ability for local control and decision-making when it comes to the deployment of AVs. I'll note that there have been ongoing discussions with our Taxi Cab Advisory Committee related to AV deployment in the region, and additional information will be brought forward to the board in January with potential subsequent actions for the board's consideration. Under the labor relations section, we'll continue to support legislation that protects the integrity of collective bargaining agreements. And then in coordination with CTA and likely a number of other entities, we will be exploring to pursue changes to SB 616 to specify in law the number of sick days a transit employee may use before facing possible disciplinary action. They wanted to provide a little bit of additional context on this item. In 2023, SB 616 was passed and changed the sick leave law in California's labor code. Among the changes to the law was an extension of anti-retaliation provisions to employees covered by CBAs, prohibiting employers from punishing an employee for using accrued sick leave or using accrued sick days. Many transit agencies have generous sick leave policies and limits on usage established through collective bargaining. MTS and its unions have agreed to reasonable limits of sick leave. And this change in SB 616 resulted in employees being able to use sick leave without any ramifications and in excess of previously negotiated CBA limits. Transit agencies specifically, they must ensure it has the staff available to deploy its services each day to the public. And as such, transit agencies typically negotiate attendance policies within CBAs to ensure its drivers and other employees meet the expectations of coming to work to provide scheduled transit services to the public. The language passed in SB 616 had the adverse effect on operations and is in direct conflict with transit agency CBAs. For MTS, the recently negotiated CBAs with the unions include mutually agreed upon sick leave accruals and limits for their members. So in an effort to address inconsistency between the recent bill efforts and transit agency CBAs, CTA in coordination with member agencies and other government entities will begin conversations with stakeholders to explain the challenges facing transit agencies and explore potential opportunities to address those. So now moving to the 2025 recap, this is a rundown of some priority legislative items. SB 71, which was signed by the governor, extends the current sunset date to 2040 for CEQA exemptions for transit and transportation projects. It also included newly added exemptions for things like clean transit projects, comprehensive operational analyses, transit stop access and safety improvements, bus shelters, et cetera. And then SB 752, that was held in the Senate Appropriations Committee. The bill would have extended the partial sales tax exemption for ZEBs. CTA was a co-sponsor of this bill and will continue exploring advancing this effort in the coming year. AB 394 was signed by the governor. Previously, only operators and ticket agents, among some other classifications, were protected under this code section. This bill expands the heightened criminal penalties that apply to a person that commits battery against transit workers, now affording those same levels of protections to all transit employees and contractors of a public transit provider. CTA was a co-sponsor of this bill in partnership with the ATU, Teamsters, and SMART. SB 707 was signed by the governor. This bill made a number of changes to the Brown Act, including items related to providing two-way teleconferencing opportunities for the public and reasonably assisting members of the public with translation services. MTS is already in compliance with many of these items. However, there will be some additional changes related to technology disruption processes that will be required mid-2026. So staff will bring back additional information next year on those efforts. AB 1207 and SB 840, both signed by the governor, and both took effect immediately upon his signature. These items are related to the cap and trade program. AB 1207 reauthorized cap and trade for an additional 15 years to January 2046 and renamed the program to Cap and Invest. And SB 840 recasted the expenditure plan of the Cap and Invest program. It maintained the continuous appropriation for the TIRCP and LC top programs, but converted the current percentage-based appropriation into a fixed dollar appropriation, so long as the auction proceed levels are met. So if proceeds come in lower than anticipated, there will be reductions in the amount of funding available in these programs. So this bill developed a new tier system to guide the order and level of appropriation for specific priorities. The top two tiers included off-the-top funding for high-speed rail and the legislature's discretionary priorities. Then under tier 3 are the other programs that have historically been funded, and that's where TRCP and LC top are included. MTS, along with many other transit agencies and CTA, spent a significant amount of time in 2025 advocating for a reauthorization plan that honored these transit priorities. So a quick recap on the Transit Transformation Task Force. This task force was a requirement of SB 125, passed in 2023. Its purpose was to provide input to CalSTA on policy recommendations to grow transit ridership and improve the transit experience for all users. The task force included 25 members. Both Sharon Cooney and Mark Watts sat on the task force. There were a total of 13 meetings discussing the challenges and priorities that should be addressed in the final report. After the last meeting took place in September of this year, CalSTA went back and developed a final report, which was just publicized last week. And our plan is to come back to the board in early 2026 with a briefing regarding the experience serving on the task force and also review the takeaways from the final report. We'll be working with other transit agencies and CTA to engage in conversations statewide on what points of advocacy public transit will pursue to build off of this report. And then looking ahead at 2026, MTS is looking to pursue its own bill related to amending our enabling statutes. And so the focus would be on seeking legislation that would clarify election procedures applicable to qualified voter initiative, as well as seeking an exemption for MTS related to the county's combined rate limitation on imposed transaction and use taxes. So as MTS is facing a structural budget deficit, we may be required to make significant cuts to transit service if a new recurring funding source is not identified. So in order to maximize the options available to MTS to bridge the fiscal cliff, we want to ensure we have the proper tools and mechanisms available to us. And one of which could potentially be a citizens initiative if there is a local organized interest in doing so. And so these bill proposals here would affirm the election procedures applicable to a qualified voter initiative on behalf of MTS and would minimize any opponent challenge in court if a measure were to be approved by voters. The regional rate exemption proposal is a common exemption entities often seek to ensure their measure is not counted towards the county's combined rate limitation. And these proposals are both included in the draft program before you today. So now I'll go ahead and hand it over first to Mark Watts and then Peter Peyser for their updates.
Thank you, Julia, and thank you to Chair and board members for having me here today. I've enjoyed working with your staff over the years. And I noticed that Julia did cover a couple items I was going to, so that'll allow me to do a more
in-depth discussion of a couple of important items. First off, what I like to do at this time of the year, just before an even-numbered session year comes up, because that's January of the even number a year is probably the busiest year, the busiest part of the legislative cycle. In January, you see the reconvening of the legislature. January 10th, you see the governor's budget come out. And throughout that whole month of January, bills that were failing to pass out of their committees in the odd number year have simply the month of January to move through the remaining committees and the floor and get to the governor. So it is very, very preoccupied with legislative action at that point in time. In addition, there's deadlines for new introduction of bills. Bills that need for introduction this coming year would need to be submitted by February 20th, preceded by January 31st for or 23rd for the deadline to submit requests. So there's a lot of activity going on right now as people prepare their legislation for the coming year. I'd like to touch briefly on the Newsom administration and some changes that have taken place that affect transportation programs. The commission, the Transportation Commission, which is all the more important than they were when they were first created. Initially, they were there to approve proposals by regional entities like SANDAG and others. In terms of the regional transportation improvement programs, their scope of work has expanded greatly with the number of transportation programs being expanded under SB1 and other sources. So they are now the arbiter of several major programs and the allocator of the funding on behalf of the legislature. So the commission is normally 11 members. They've had a vacancy for several months when Director or Commissioner Tavaloni from Riverside vacated the seat there. They have now filled that seat, so they have a full complement. The new person is Paulette Brown Hines from Riverside, really strong background in media and the like in Riverside County Transportation Commission, and others in Riverside are very happy to see her appointment and look forward to working with her. And as well, I will be working with her on your behalf there as well. The other thing, this is a bit of a disappointment for those of us who have worked the last dozen plus years with Chad Edison at the Secretary's office. He was most recently been the Undersecretary for Transit Programs. He had developed over that decade plus a real hands-on understanding from the ground up of the entirety of transit and rail programs in the state. And consequently, he was probably the singularly most important person that I would deal with on your behalf and other client behalves in transit issues of significance. So he has taken a position in the private sector and they have not backfilled him. So we're waiting for that appointment, and I'll be in touch with Julia and Sharon when that is done. Julia also did touch on the transit task force. I will just echo the disappointment in the final report. I'm still digging through it. Having been on that committee with Executive Director Cooney, a lot of good spade work was done. There's a lot of good ideas in it, but they failed to hit the punchline. There's no real discussion on what's a good source of funding that they could recommend as a committee to the legislature to consider in the coming years. So it is greatly disappointing to get to that point. I could see that coming when I was on that board, and I did make one attempt to increase and get support to increase statewide funding, and it failed and fell short. So it is a mixed bag, as I indicated. On the one hand, they have a lot of great ideas operationally, how to improve the functionality of transit and rail, but the real need was not really fully addressed. They didn't really dig into what's a good source of future funding. Sorry. Oh, pardon me. I thought I was interrupting somebody. I keep forgetting to move the slides. I apologize. Okay, so I'm going to move forward to talk about funding sources that historically and are on the table now in Sacramento. As we all know, SANDAG with Transnet and you all have participated through your organizations in the various iterations of the local sales tax. That program was first granted as a jurisdictional authority to many transit agencies back in the 70s when they were transitioning from private or civic organizations into more regional. Beyond that, there had been no highway-oriented programs, and in 1984, Santa Clara County sought legislation and was granted. At that point in time, the majority vote at the jurisdictional level was all that was needed to approve. Subsequently, and as we find ourselves today, the vote threshold is 2/3 within each jurisdiction, and that's very difficult, as we found out over time. There have been various attempts to change that voting threshold. Beginning in 2023, Senator Burton carried a bill on my behalf, SB 3 in 2004. It's a while back, but we nearly got it through the entire legislature. It was a constitutional amendment, or it would have put on the ballot, not a constitutional amendment, would have put on the ballot the request for the voters to approve a majority or 55% vote approval for local sales taxes. It was ultimately opposed by the then Governor Davis, and there have been a few attempts since then to change the voter by legislative action. Most notably, the activities by Assembly Member Aguirre Curry over a period of about 4 legislative sessions attempted with constitutional amendments and was able to finally move a bill through, but it has not been put before the voters, so it was withdrawn. So she has, I don't know what she intends to do this coming session year. She's in a more elevated position as the majority leader, and consequently her duties are more broadly spread. There is one case law-based change to the way that jurisdictions may see tax impositions on a majority vote basis. And that emerged oddly from a lawsuit between the cannabis industry and the city of Upland over the timing of a special election. That was the issue that went to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court made a judgment call on behalf of that case, but they also made a note that initiatives, which was at the heart of the case, initiatives are not. This sounds pretty funny, but initiatives are not individuals, so they're not voters as an entity, and they made a finding that an initiative placed on the ballot within a jurisdiction, it would not be subject to the other constitutional provisions that require approval by 2/3 vote. Hence, it became a majority vote. Cities and counties under the California Election Code had the authority to see initiatives emerge within their jurisdictions. The California Election Code also specified that a couple of different types of special local agencies would have that same authority beyond just cities and counties. That did not include transportation agencies, nor did it include any agency that did not have an elected board, directly elected board, as opposed to a board comprised of appointed members from their elected entities. So those things, those items stood in the way of looking at regional transportation agencies or transit districts with express authority seeing initiatives merge in their district. There have been several bills in the transportation arena, one for the Smart Rail program in Northern California that authorized, should an initiative emerge under their power of authority for a sales tax, they would then have the ability to see that approved by a majority vote rather than a 2/3 vote. The same thing was included in a major piece of legislation for transit services in the Bay Area. The bill by Senator Wiener, SB 63, authorizes a 5-county jurisdiction to have the authority for a sales tax. And it too includes the language that authorizes an initiative that emerges in that jurisdiction would be eligible and qualify to use a majority vote basis. There was also a bill introduced and carried and got to the governor's desk, SB 510, that had the same authority more broadly drafted for transit agencies that had tax authority to see initiatives emerge that would then have a majority vote. That bill was vetoed by the governor. So at this point in time, only the transit entities I mentioned, the Bay Area 5-county jurisdiction and the Smart Rail have that authority. But it's interesting to see the conversation. That bill that I mentioned by 512. Anyway, it's either 10 or 12. Pardon forgive me for my forgetfulness. Was strongly pushed by the construction labor coalitions in Sacramento. So I believe we'll see it reemerge in some form to meet the governor's challenges when he vetoed that measure. And so that's yet to come. Finally, I just wanted to mention that in movement now, 2 measures have been submitted, or one measure submitted and is being considered for approval to circulate. And that's a measure by the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. It locks down a number of taxes, like property taxes, pay, and other local community taxes, and requires a 2/3 vote for those. It also goes in and closes the loophole that I just described for initiative measures. It is in circulation at this point in time, has not qualified. Another interesting measure is ACA 13. It had been approved and cleared for the ballot. It was on the originally scheduled for the November ballot, but it was moved because of Prop 50. And it's going to be coming up again. This measure says any measure that goes on the ballot that changes the vote threshold for particular taxes would then have to have that same threshold applied to it statewide. So in other words, if the Jarvis Taxpayers Association says it has to be a 2/3 vote and Mr. Ward's bill passes, then it would require a statewide 2/3 approval rather than simple majority to impose that new structure. So with that, I'll bring my presentation to a close. I know I've been going on, and I look forward to hearing the presentation on the federal government.
Thank you, Mark. Morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. It's great to be here. I'm Peter Peyser. I represent MTS in Washington, D.C. Thank you for giving me the chance to leave that wonderful city for a few days, not just because the weather's better, but there's a lot that's better right now in San Diego as compared to Washington. I'll just preface this by saying that it's been a very interesting year in Washington. We have a federal government and a Department of Transportation that has reached into the very core procedures and processes that agencies like MTS have been using for decades to manage their contracting, to manage their own administrative procedures around issues of diversity, equity, inclusion, disadvantaged business enterprise, contracting, and then of course, issues surrounding transit agencies cooperating with enforcement efforts by ICE and other federal agencies. So the tenor of things has been very challenging. But having said that, on a funding, strictly on the basis of funding, things have been relatively stable. And this presentation will sort of call out all of these issues as we go. So let's talk about the three areas I'll talk about here are the annual spending levels we anticipate for the current fiscal year that's already started and also the upcoming one. I'll talk about the expected action in the coming year on the 5-year reauthorization of federal transportation programs. This is legislation that sets policy and maximum funding levels over a 5-year period. And then annually, Congress actually appropriates the money against those levels. And then finally, talk about discretionary grant opportunities we're anticipating coming up for MTS in the coming year. Oh, wrong way, sorry. So let's talk about the appropriations process. This is the process that starts when a president submits their budget early in the year, and then Congress works through spending bills. We have all witnessed the drama around this process this year with the government shutdown, the longest in history, occurring earlier in the fall around trying to approve these annual spending measures. In the arena of transportation, the transportation programs are linked to housing and urban development in a single appropriation bill, one of the 12 that Congress approves. There is not significant controversy on that one in particular. The spending levels that the House and the Senate have approved on programs that are of primary interest to MTS actually increase a little bit following the authorization levels that were set back in 2021 when the bipartisan infrastructure law was approved. The only difference between the two is the House would drastically cut the part of the transit program that is for new starts and extensions of transit systems, not a current issue for MTS and San Diego County, but certainly in the future, that is the program that funded Midcoast. That would be the program that would fund any future extensions or new starts in San Diego County. But that's the only key difference right now. So as you read about the drama around spending bills in Washington, it doesn't really extend to transportation funding. We expect it to be relatively stable for this fiscal year that started October 1. That process currently is on a deadline of January 30th. When the government shutdown ended, Congress extended current funding levels until January 30th. There could be another shutdown drama coming next month, but it appears that there is enough momentum to actually get these things done by the end of the month so that we can move ahead to the next fiscal year, fiscal 27. That will kick off when the president's budget is submitted in February, likely. And that budget will reflect what the administration is proposing for this longer term 5-year bill that is supposed to be acted upon next year. So we could well see that budget will suggest some changes, potentially funding cuts, because there is no authorization in force at the moment for fiscal year 27. So we'll be keeping an eye on that, and there'll be a process to start working through that in the spring of next year. There are opportunities to earmark funding for specific projects that will be in that process. Those opportunities are fairly small dollar amounts, usually less than $5 million. And MTS has taken advantage of that in the past for projects, and we'll certainly be looking at opportunities to work with our congressional delegation, both in the House and Senate, to advance some projects in that fiscal year 2027 process coming up this year. Now the 5-year reauthorization. This is a very significant cycle. The last one, of course, brought us the bipartisan infrastructure law, which included these programs and many others under the heading of infrastructure, but generated significant funding increases for transit programs and highway programs and passenger rail programs. And there will be a struggle coming up to sustain those levels. There are those on Capitol Hill on the Republican side who are saying, look, that infrastructure law that President Biden pushed through, that was kind of a one-off investment. We're going to have to go back to previous levels and, save some money here. Democrats are taking the position that the Biden bipartisan infrastructure law set a new floor, and we should be building on that. Our delegation certainly is very strongly favorable to that, with the exception of Mr. Issa. But I think that that's going to be a very important battle. And within the total funding, there'll be a fight, how much for highways, how much for transit. There's been a sort of a 40-year consensus on Capitol Hill that the split between highways and transit should be 80% highways, 20% transit. There have been small deviations in that, up and down over the years. But now there is a significant movement on the Republican side to de-emphasize transit and focus on what the chairman of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee calls, quote unquote, traditional infrastructure, highways and bridges. So there'll be a battle over that coming up. We also anticipate a battle over the potential inclusion in this legislation of some of these policy initiatives that the Trump administration has been pushing. Things I mentioned, like no diversity, equity, and inclusion, no DBE preferences based solely on race and gender for contracting, cooperation with immigration enforcement efforts by public transit agencies. Those policies have been challenged in court. State of California has been leading in that, and that has provided some relief to MTS and other California agencies to comply with some of these more onerous provisions. But there may well be an effort by the Trump administration and Republicans on Capitol Hill to write these things into statute, which would make moot any pending litigation that is intended to reverse these policies or postpone their implementation. So that could be a battle between the two parties. And then on the Democratic side, there will be initiatives on operating assistance. We've talked about, and Julia mentioned how that's part of the priority for MTS. Federal government, since the Reagan administration, has not allowed federal funds to be used for operating assistance for large transit systems. Of course, the COVID aid packages that took place in 20 and 21 did make significant operating assistance available for transit agencies, and that has bridged MTS and others through this challenging period where ridership was significantly reduced. Now it's coming back, but it helped to push out any fiscal cliff. MTS in particular, among California transit agencies and really national transit agencies, has managed that process better than virtually any other major transit agency in the country. Other transit agencies are facing much more challenges and facing them earlier, and have already faced them and been in pretty desperate straits. So operating assistance would help deal with that. Of course, the preference that we would have would be for that to be over and above current funding levels, not just making what we currently get more flexible. But that will be a very significant debate. And then under the heading of one of the watchwords of this year of abundance, there will be a move to make the capital investment grant program that extends existing transit lines and builds new ones much easier to navigate and make the federal process for approving those projects go more quickly and less expensively for transit projects. All of those things, all of these points will make it more challenging to have a bipartisan product, which is the stated goal of congressional leaders in both the House and the Senate. But each of these items will test that. So there's certainly a potential that this process will get into some difficulty this year. It may well be kicked into next year. And one of the reasons that may happen is the upcoming election, which Democrats hope and expect will provide them control of at least the House of Representatives, and therefore give them more leverage in this process in 2027 than they have in 2026. This kind of an outcome on this legislation is actually very common. It is the norm for it to get pushed beyond its expiration date with an extension. These programs expire on September 30 next year, but it is certainly potential they will be kicked into the 2027, and then we'll have an opportunity to revisit these with a different setup on Capitol Hill. But this legislation will start to move this year. We'll see how far the process goes, but we're going to be working closely with our delegation and the House and the Senate to make sure that the priorities that MTS has set are under consideration as this process goes forward. Discretionary grant applications coming up. There is one open right now, a program called Build, which is a multimodal program with a maximum grant amount of $25 million. There may be some opportunities. I know the staff is currently looking at projects that may fit within that. Then there is a program for bus funding, which MTS has applied for in recent years, has had excellent applications that are highly rated, but have not been funded in the last few years. We're certainly going to make another attempt at that. And then there's several different pots of money for railroad crossing eliminations, which could, have been like the Palomar grade separation project that got some funding in the past. Other similar projects like that could be helped by this program, where there'll be a competition coming up this summer. All of these are obviously programs where there is, as the title says, discretion by the administration to award or not award. It's a competitive national process. What we've seen from this administration, surprisingly, actually, to me, is that California has done okay in these discretionary grant programs when they've had competitions. So there is an opportunity here, and I think it's important, particularly on the bus program. That's the award there is by the Federal Transit Administration. There is a new administrator running that organization. His name is Mark Molinaro. He's a lifelong politician, started in local government in the Hudson Valley of New York at the age of 19, and worked through state government and the assembly and local government, and ran for governor of New York a few years back. And he's more of what we would call a traditional Republican. He certainly is implementing the Trump administration's priorities. His primary goal has been to promote security and safety on transit systems. When MTS received its award from the TSA, Transportation Security Administration, part of the Department of Homeland Security, this summer, the Gold Standard Award, one of only 2 agencies in the country to get that for safety and security. He took note of that, and we made sure that he did. And he expressed an interest in coming out and learning more about how MTS has addressed security and safety issues. We invited him to come out. He has accepted the invitation. We're now working on calendaring that, hopefully early in the calendar year. But having him come out and see MTS and understand on that particular issue, the way that MTS has been addressing safety and security and the link to returning ridership in the system because of that is going to be helpful to us as we look for funding opportunities from the administration. So I think that's, something that a place where we can work with him because of his interest in that particular aspect of MTS's success in the last couple of years. So with that, I will wrap up and happy to answer any questions that come up.
Thank you. The last slide is just our recommendation slide. To your next slide. Thank you. Thank you. So recommendation before you today is for the recommend that the Board of Directors approve the 2026 legislative program. And we're happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
We have no public comments, Chair.
Okay, we'll move on to board discussion on this item, beginning with Director Moreno.
Thank you for the presentation. I think it's obvious that we have stellar lobbyists, not only in Sacramento, but also in DC. So I appreciate you guys advocating for MTS and also you giving us this presentation. I found it to be very insightful. For Mr. Watts, last year, Assemblymember Ward presented a bill to change the makeup of this body. What is the status? I don't have the bill number, but what is the status of that?
It became a 2-year bill. Yeah. It's a 2-year bill. I have not seen the schedule if it's been reset. I was planning to talk to their office as we got closer to January.
So what does it became a 2-year bill mean?
I apologize.
As a person that has been in Sacramento and lives and breathes that, what does that mean?
It failed to move for a number of reasons. He withdrew it actually at the request of staff here or management here. Whether he wants to continue to move, he has until January to make that determination, and the committees would be accepting if he decides to move ahead, either as is or changes it. So I was waiting to see closer to the beginning of January to see the actual list of what they intend to schedule to hear and then talk to their office.
Okay. Would you recommend this body take a position on his previous bill? So that we give you clear direction as to where we want to go with that bill? Because it was, I don't know if you heard the board meeting, but I was very taken back and surprised. And I think I don't think there was a discussion about who he had spoken to about the changes that, would modify this body. I'm not in support, just to throw that out there. So we're all very clear.
I would welcome direction as I move forward and interact with his office to find out what their plans are.
Wonderful. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So I would ask the chair if we could take that up in January and maybe get a little bit more of an explanation of what the bill entails. It was a few months ago, but and who knows if he is reintroducing it. Thank you for that clarification. I've always heard that if a bill goes on a 2-year track, it's pretty much dead, but I'm sure you've seen crazier things. Moving right along, this MTS has a robust zero emission bus program. We have millions of dollars that are parked in that program. Now, I know that the governor has kept really firm with his clean energy transition plan.
amidst Trump's administration's efforts to roll back the federal climate policies and also cut funding. I used to be the budget chair, and we're facing some real difficult budget issues and what do we call it? A financial cliff? Fiscal cliff. There we go. So we have some really difficult decisions to make in this next year. It would be great. And like I said, I think we have $250 million of zero emission bus program funding. We don't have, from my understanding, we don't have a clear plan. And I have asked for a list of capital improvement projects where that funding is going to get allocated. So it would be good to get an insight from you as to whether we continue in this very robust plan, or if we deviate from it and start utilizing that funding for other necessities that we do have, considering that we're facing a cliff. I put a note about AB 394. I don't know what it referred to, but sorry. But and then moving on to the federal side, congratulations on getting Mr. Mark Molinaro. I think that speaks volumes to your work in DC. Getting any federal agent, I think, to San Diego, especially right now, is definitely a heavy lift. And I agree with you in regards to the federal funding. I am a big stickler. I'm a city council member in the city of San Diego, and I'm a big stickler of the city of San Diego being very aggressive with applying for grants. Obviously, not knowing whether we're going to get them or not, I think it's important for us to stay very connected to the grant writing. So thank you for that. The other thing that I will ask for Mr. Watts, the CTC, SANDAG seems to have a very, very, very good relationship with the California Transportation Commission, and rightfully so. I'm wondering if we can invite and maybe create more of a, when they do come to San Diego, it would be nice for them to be checking out our facilities and to know what's happening. Just because those commissioners, I know we have a few local ones, but especially the executive directors, when big decisions are made, I think it's imperative for them to know what, it's good for them to know the projects that we're working on and what they mean to our region. So I would push to have some of the commissioners and especially the executive director come out.
I think that's a fantastic idea, and it's a tool I've used when we had some special needs in a couple other clients' areas. But I think it's a very good idea to do that. What I think we could do is look at their list of meetings, because it's not just their major commission meetings where you can kind of double down and have them come visit. They have a number of committee meetings spread around the state. And that may be a more productive way to start making the introductions, find out that there's an equity meeting being held in XYZ, and say, well, if you're down there for that purpose, let's see if you can come, we can come up and meet with you. And I'd be glad to help coordinate that. I think it really is a way to foster success before the commission. Now, often when the items get to the commission, it's all been vetted and it's pretty pro forma. You don't want to be in the position where it's not pro forma. So this is a very good idea, and I'm glad to work with staff to make this happen.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I had a situation on a project in the city of San Diego where we were looking to expand a major thoroughfare for semi trucks. And it benefited me greatly to meet with the executive director and a few commissioners to explain what this expansion really was. Yep. With that, also, I recently became, I don't know how much we deal with the Coastal Commission here, but I recently became an alternate for the San Diego region. So if I could ever be of service, I'm a phone call away. But thank you for both of your presentations. I truly appreciated it. Thank you.
Thank you, Director.
Do you need a motion?
This is an action item. Yes.
I am happy to move the staff's recommendation.
Thank you, Director Marino. There was a second from I heard a second from Director Downey. Okay, thank you, Director Downey. And we will follow up on Assembly Member Ward's plans, if any, on the bill you cited. Let's go to Director Bush.
Yes, and I think Director Downey, did you have your hand up before me? Okay. Well, so yeah, I thank you both for the presentation and the thoroughness. So first, Peter, really comprehensive, and you came highly recommended by one of our union leaders for your work. So so thank you for that. And then for Mark, I really appreciate your emphasis on the voter thresholds and the Aguilar Curry bill, because I know that's been going for years, and I really would push all of my colleagues. I think that should be a big priority for us as a board. If we're looking at sales tax or any other revenue generating, again, I've said this before, I think it's almost a waste of our time if we're going to go after a 2/3 threshold. I really think that should be 55%. I actually thought that, I guess I remembered incorrectly, because I thought that had gone to the voters as a constitutional amendment and it failed. So can you talk about that?
You're correct. I was in error.
I'm sorry?
You are correct. I was in error. I was talking too fast and overspoke myself.
Okay. So if it failed, it was at 2024. So just this past cycle that it failed?
Right. And it was a comprehensive package. It was broader than just transportation. It was infrastructure. And I think that led to its failure.
Got it. So, I mean, maybe there's a way to push that more. And I think there was a lot on the ballot. And I think sometimes those coalitions, political coalitions, if they're spread too thin, there was a lot going on at a local and a state level. So when there's too much going on, I feel like that really lost emphasis, like from a lot of us. So I still think, I don't know if you had thoughts about that, but I still think we should pursue it.
Yeah, there was also the beginning of the sense of voter fatigue and affordability issues at that point in time. And I think that coupled with what you mentioned, sir, just led to its unsuccess.
Okay. So yes, I think we should, as a board, still continue to push that. Other question, and I do want to support what Director Moreno said about the potential or proposed MTS bill. I don't know anything about that, so I definitely support that coming back in January. And I would recommend sooner rather than later, given the sensitivity of timing. So if there is any reform efforts, I'm open to it. I'm always open to change and to improvements and efficiency or whatnot, but I have no idea what's, going on one way or another, and would need to understand that better before I, support or oppose something.
I understand that, sir. And I will have an answer for Julia to pass on by Friday of where it stands and whether it's moving forward, because I think that's really immediate job one, because it's in a position where it can move. I just don't know right now if they intend to move.
Got it. Okay. And then other question, SANDAG issues, that's regional. I know that's not, I don't know if that's considered legislative, but they just passed their update to the regional transportation plan. I don't know if staff had any comments on that. I feel like that's related on a policy level. I could say I was surprised and maybe I'll even say disappointed. I was really disappointed by that update to the RTP and what appeared to be really strong cuts to transit. I don't know, and I don't feel that SANDAG had really engaged us at MTS. So I feel like that was lacking, but I don't know if you, Mark, or Sharon can speak to it differently. But I just don't feel like we were engaged enough in that conversation. That's historically been a trend where SANDAG hasn't, we just haven't collaborated enough. And I know we're both busy, but it's just, I wasn't really happy with that. So is SANDAG part of this?
A part of
kind of this legislative policy discussion.
Julia works very closely with our peer agencies as well as the cities when she talks about our legislative program. I can't really speak.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Sharon, but that wasn't, SANDAG wasn't part of this. I didn't miss it. That wasn't part of this PowerPoint or presentation, right?
No.
And I don't know. So, I mean, should it be as a kind of, I just feel like some of these issues are really tied in and related when it comes to funding and just infrastructure planning.
Yeah.
Yeah, we meet regularly with SANDAG. Our planning department, of course, works extremely close with them too, especially when it relates to the regional transportation plan. Certainly those doors are open to always collaborate. And we share our legislative platform and programs with our PR agencies.
Got it. Well, so on that then, moving forward, I would recommend that anytime that there's a big initiative like the RTP, but I think the next might be the RTIP, which is more the 5-year, and that's where the devil is really in the details, and that's like more of the immediate implementation. So my recommendation would be that staff, before it goes to the full SANDAG board or even their committees, I think that we should have a discussion about that and then get a recommendation from you all. And I don't expect MTS staff to have perfect consensus with SANDAG. I expect us to do what's best for us. And then we as a board decide, and then we can give SANDAG a recommendation. Hey, we're the transit operators. This is what we see as the best fit recommendations for our transit system moving forward. So that's my suggestions. And yeah, but otherwise, I thank you all for all your work on this. Our lobbyists, I think you guys have been doing really solid work. Thank you, Julia, for your collaboration on this. And yeah, I support this item.
Thank you, Director Bush. Director Hall.
Yeah, I just got a couple quick questions. This is for either one of you. Everybody, a lot of the agencies are pretty much upside down or about to be upside down. There's financial cliff. And I hear a lot of plans to plan, but is there any plan to write checks? Because we got a big problem coming up and we're not the only one.
That's a really good question about how the state intends to deal with that with regional entities. There was a broad hope that the Transit Transformation Task Force that we spoke about, that Director Cooney and myself participated on. And as I mentioned, that was one of the failures of that group report. Whatever was intended to be in there is how to help finance and fiscally assist transit agencies did not show up in that final report. So I'll just set that aside. That was probably the best opportunity, and it was stillborn, basically. I did indicate that there's a number of good operational thoughts and tweaks and how to operate better and more efficiently, but the big question was left unanswered. This administration, it's in charge of
and by this administration, do you mean?
I'm sorry, the state administration. Okay. They have, through the budget process, provided an opportunity for the Bay Area. For the Bay Area to have a loan for their transit entities of as much as $750 million. And I'm going to editorialize. I think that was like Lucy and the football. They put it out there and they pulled it away, because the reason I say that is the deadline to cut the deal on how to repay a loan from the various county agencies, and I represent 2 of them in that area. That deadline came and went because the Department of Finance would refuse to talk. And I hope they're not listening, but they did refuse to talk. And as a consequence, that funding is not being made available to the Bay Area entities that need it. In lieu of that, they came away with the authority to do a 5-county joint sales tax on the ballot. And so that was, instead of a loan and free money, they get the opportunity to go try to have voters in 5 counties approve a single jurisdictional sales tax to help them with the fiscal cliff. Parallel to that, the administration had provided as much as $1 billion to LA for wildfire relief, and that one is being negotiated, but it's been several months. I haven't seen the outcome of that. I only mentioned that because that was paired with the Bay Area Transit solution. I think it's behooving, if the budget has, well, here's the challenge. A couple of years ago, the governor had a huge reserve, a huge surplus, and was able to ladle it out. That surplus is gone. It's evaporated, and it's now a forward-looking deficiency for the next 3 or 4 years. So the flexibility of the state to help entities like MTS and others is going to be very, very limited. There also is, I think the affordability track discussions that we're hearing in Washington were started in Sacramento. When the new speaker came in, and there was a change of leadership on the Senate side, that was the watchword of the day a year ago. So I think if you combine the fact that the state budget is going to be in a deficit without some change in revenues, because it's an expenditure side problem. If it's going to continue to be in a deficit, they're not going to be able to help. And there's just, without a new source of revenue, I'm not sure how we're going to be able to get funding down here. Now, the Cap and Invest program may be, but it doesn't help with operations. But what it can do, if we can figure out the mechanism to do this, is adjust what they just approved so there is more transit capital, and have the transit capital programs that we have on board now maybe made more flexible to help out on the operations. That's about the only new framework I can see coming down, given the circumstance that we see in the state budget.
Peter?
Yeah, and I wanted to just mention that the failure of the Transit Transformation Task Force report to identify funding streams for transit leads me to believe that it can't be driven through the administration. It's going to have to come from a coalition of transit supporters and transit agencies. And so an effort that I'm trying to lead with the California Transit Association is to come up with a funding package. Different transit agencies have access to different types of funding based on what types of transit they provide. And so we need to build a coalition that will address all transit agencies. The simple one for me that I pushed, and Mark also supported on the task force, was to double the Transportation Development Act funding, which is basically, it's a 1/4 cent sales tax, and make it a 1/2 cent sales tax. That would have been a boon for us. But what I understand is that it's not, other transit agencies can't access that funding. They're not eligible for it. So we need to build as a state and hand it to the legislators, because I believe the legislators, and I've spoken to several of them that have told me they expected this task force to come up with a funding plan. And instead they came up with a bunch of sort of nice to have service improvement type of things with no funding to back it up. So that's where we need to really drive that into the legislators' hands, because it's clearly not going to come from the administration.
Right. And that's taking to the federal government too. Is if people make laws, they need to attach a check to it. I've said that for years. And so if we're going to demand, or if they're going to demand us to do things, there needs to be a check attached to it. So is the federal government's real good at planning to plan, but can they come up with any money?
Yeah, and I sort of touched on this earlier in talking about this upcoming legislation to reauthorize all the programs for the next 5 years. There is a push on Capitol Hill to make new funding available for operating assistance, coming largely from the Democratic side. There's a couple of bills been introduced. They don't have any Republican co-sponsors yet. But there's also conversation going on around providing operating assistance, but limiting it to only being used for safety and security operating costs, like staffing. Whatever, for both law enforcement, the contracts that transit agencies all over the country have with their local county sheriff or the local police department, that you could use that money to pay those costs. You could use it to pay for your own security, transit ambassadors that agencies have to monitor the code of conduct compliance on the system. So short of law enforcement, but very important part of of the security and safety on the system, as well as fair enforcement. So that, could be a path that Republicans would sign on to. And that's why it's particularly important, the relationship that we're building with the administrator of President Trump's Federal Transit Administration around this link between safety and security here and MTS's position as perhaps the leading large transit agency in the country in restoring ridership back to previous levels. People look at those two things and say, oh, maybe there's a connection between the security that riders feel here as compared to other places and the return of ridership. So if we can continue that conversation with the Trump administration, that could give us a better opportunity to have this be something that they will say, well, this fits our priority. Our priority is safety and security. So I think that's our opportunity. We'll find out this year if that legislation moves, but we're certainly going to be focusing on trying to make that happen.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Hall. Director Moreno.
I just forgot to thank Julia. Thank you for your leadership on this. That's all I wanted to say. We appreciate it very much.
So do we, by the way.
Thank you, Director Downey.
It's funny, I pushed my switch and then I unpushed it and I pushed it again. I just wanted to say I am the chair of the SANDAG Regional Planning Committee, and I have repeatedly asked, what did MTS have to say on this? So I'm just telling you publicly, at any point, I want to make sure when we coordinate that we are getting MTS's input, but I will remind everybody on the dais, SANDAG has to produce a plan because California regulations require it. California regulations set the rules of what has to be in the plan. But I explained to my council partners, it's just like the fact that we have to produce our regional housing plans doesn't mean we have to go fund all the affordable housing that is needed in our area. And so one of the questions I think when I'm hearing from Councilmember Bush is that we want stuff in the plan because we want it funded. I want to remind everybody, those are two different things. However, I did impress on my SANDAG colleagues, it doesn't make any sense to put stuff in the plan that MTS has no ability to start a new line anywhere. When there were things in there that discussed there'd be new rapid lines somewhere, when we can't pay the ones we have. I said, that's just as dumb. And so we did get one removed that thought they'd put one over the Coronado Bridge and do all kinds of crazy stuff. And Caltrans, then MTS said no. So we got that one removed. But I would just encourage as we move along, I'm trying to see how early we can get the coordination, but just wanted everybody to understand it's a plan. Doesn't mean there's funding from SANDAG. So everybody that wants something that wasn't in the plan, you wouldn't have gotten it funded anyway. So I just want to put that out there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Downey. Chair Pro Tem Montgomery Stepp.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the presentation and the ongoing work. We know this is every day that you all are communicating with our various levels of government. So thank you. I was hesitant to say anything, but I just want to highlight our recognition around security, right? With this board and particularly the Public Security Committee has put a lot of effort in for the last 7 years over really trying to plan ahead and not, we never disinvested, right? We always fully invested in security, but we added programming and different types of engagement with our riders on top of, our contracts with our security firms. And I really believe that along with youth opportunity passes and the things that really engage people to come back to ride MTS really helped. So I really, in the discussion, especially, around really being able to agree and engage with the Trump administration on that particular issue, that we don't erase the work that was done because it was not, we had a traditional foundation, but we added a lot of different things to that. And I just really believe that helped, that looking at it holistically really helped with being able to be recognized in such a way and making people feel safe. kind of really, coming with a lot of different ideas and parsing those out and making very sound decisions, even when they were resisted from, the traditional ways of MTS of the past. So I just wanted that to be a part of the conversation, and maybe as we move forward with the platform, if we kind of explain to other agencies what we've done and the way we've done it, then maybe that will open up doors and ideas for them as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Pro Tem Montgomery Steppe. We'll go back to Director Bush.
I'm sorry, just real quick follow up with Sharon. You said on the TDA that part of the barrier is the sales tax, adding it to 50 cents from 25 cents to 50 cents. That there's some transit agencies that aren't that can't access that. So is there a plan or a proposal to fix that? I think I missed that.
Yeah, so that's what we would work with our peers in other parts of the state. The MTS was created right when the MTDB was created. It was created at the time that the TDA was created. And it was Senator Mills who really protected MTDB at the time. So we get our TDA directly, whereas in other parts of the state, the MPO controls where funding gets.
Sharon, I'm sorry, can you not, acronyms?
Oh, sorry.
I'm not following.
The Metropolitan Planning Organization, SANDAG's counterparts in other parts. We used to be called MTDB. We changed our name to MTS. It was the Metropolitan Transportation Development Board. We continue to keep that corporate name because we have it on a lot of our documents, but yeah.
Thank you for that clarification. That's helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Director Bush. All right, well, I will just chime in with my thanks as well to both of you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your observations and sharing your insights on what you're seeing both here in Sacramento and in Washington, D.C. Thank you again to Ms. Tuer. And thank you to our CEO for your statewide leadership on many of these issues. We have a motion from Director Moreno. We have a second from Director Downey. Clerk, please call the roll.
Members, please make your selections on your tablets.
Enjoy your vacation, Peter.
Chair, the motion passes with 14 members voting yes and 1 member absent.
Thank you very much, Clerk. All right, for time management purposes, that was a good, robust discussion. But we are going to take item 13, the Fair Change Study Update, next. We are going to move the last 2 non-urgent informational items to our January meeting. That includes item 14, the fiscal year 2025 annual operating reports, and item 15, the grants administration report. Both of those will be moved to our January meeting. There's nothing urgent that needs to be heard on those today. We will proceed now with item 13. It is also an informational update on the Fair Change Study, and Mark Olson is going to kick off this presentation.
Well, thank you, Chair, and thank you, members of the board. Again, my name is Mark Olson, Director of Marketing and Communications here at MTS, and joining me for this presentation is Tim Garrett, who's an Associate Regional Planner at SANDAG. And today we're going to be talking about a Fair Change Study update. Just to give you a little bit of a high-level look as to why we're doing a Fair Change Study, is it's part of a broader financial sustainability strategy that the agency has been embarking on to extend the fiscal cliff from 2028 out to 2030 to give us a longer runway to look at other avenues of funding that we might be able to secure to bridge the budget gap. One of those things that we're looking at is exploring a possible revenue measure for the 2028 ballot. We're adjusting some service levels that are allowed under Board Policy 42. We're shifting and looking at shifting some non-essential capital funding to support operations. We're looking at increasing non-fair revenue sources such as advertising, and then identifying some other internal cost savings as part of the agency's efforts. Here's some background on the Fair Change Study process. So the board voted in February of this year to work with SANDAG and NCTD on a fare change study, and it's really a big component to our overall budget. You know, if you look at MTS sitting on a table, you know, the four primary areas of funding are federal funding, state funding, local transnet funding, and then fares account for a big part of that as well, about 20%. And fare change studies are a very natural part of any transit agency. We do this to make sure that prices align with the current financial conditions, market demands, and technology improvements. Here's a little historical perspective on fare change studies that the agency has embarked on over the years. In 2008 and 2009, there was a couple of fare changes that took place. This was also timed up with the Great Recession that was happening at the time. Revenues were down. There was a budget gap there, and we needed a way to fill that. And so the board at that time looked at fare changes as one of the many remedies there. So at this time, we increased trolley one-way fares to $1.50 to $2, increased bus one-way fares by a quarter, eliminated free transfers, and eliminated the trolley zone fare system in favor of a flat fare to help simplify the fare structure. In 2009, we increased the day pass to $5, and this was also the last time we increased the adult monthly passes, and that was increased by $4 to $72. Seniors went up $1, and youth fares went up $2. In 2019, 2020, we did another fare change process. And in 2019, this was also the introduction of the Pronto fare collection system. And at that time, in 2019, we eliminated the multi-day pass to further simplify the fare structure. We increased the day pass from $5 to $6. We introduced a senior and youth day pass, which didn't exist before, and that was at $3. And then we lowered monthly passes for youth from 36 to 23, and then increased senior fares at that time from 18 to 23 to find alignment between youth and seniors for that discount program. In 2020, this is when we adopted the best fare functionality with fare capping, which basically meant that nobody was going to pay more than the cost of a day pass in a single day or a monthly pass in a single month. The system was set up to be able to cap a rider at that amount. So they wouldn't be, if they rode more than the $72, they wouldn't have to pay more. And at that time, we also added unlimited 2-hour transfers, which was a big benefit to riders at that time. So what we've done recently is we've looked at some peer fares with some of, and I call peers agencies that are of like size and scope. So they offer bus service as well as light rail service. And we looked at some of the main categories of passes here with Portland, Dallas, Salt Lake City, San Francisco Muni, Sacramento, and Denver. And there's a lot of different fare discount programs that all agencies have. There's really no cookie cutter approach to it, but these are the core passes that all of the agencies had that we could look at. And as you can see with the adult one-way passes, these were between $2.50 and $3. With the adult day passes, each one of the agencies had between $5 and $7 for the day pass. And then the monthly pass, you can see here, there's a bit of a broader range between $85 and $126. Now, when you compare that to MTS in the same category, you look at the adult one-way pass, and we're $2.50. So we're at the low end of that. Based on our peers. And then the day pass, we're right in the middle. That range was between 5 and 7. We're at 6. And then with the adult monthly pass here, you see we're at 72. So we're much, much lower than our peer agencies with the adult monthly pass. And I think this is important to flag because most of our fare revenue, about 88% of it, comes from one of these three categories for adults. On the other side of that, when you look at senior, disabled, Medicare recipient passes at about half that at $1.25, $3, and then even lower than half of the adult monthly at $23. This accounts for about 11% of our fare revenue. And then we have the category of youth, which is a free program for the Youth Opportunity Pass. Here's, like I mentioned before, a lot of agencies have all kinds of discount programs out there. I wanted to talk briefly about some of the ones that we have so you can get an idea of the different discount programs that we have. We have Pronto Extend, which is free transit for those that are 18 to 24 exiting the foster care system. Family Weekends, which allows 2 children 12 and under to ride free with a paying adult. We have Holiday Friends Ride Free, where somebody can ride free with a paying adult. 5 and under children can ride for free. College semester pass provides a 40% discount off the adult monthly pass. College monthly passes is a 20% discount off the monthly pass. We have a classroom day pass program for students, chaperones, teachers, where they can get $1.50 for a day pass. And then we have an employer and business partner program, which provides a staggered discount based on how many passes they would buy per month, between 10% and 20% discounts off the adult monthly pass. So the process that we're going through right now, we're doing a lot of data collection with the help of SANDAG and North County Transit District. We're looking at developing some fare change scenarios to see what kind of impact any type of fare increases would have on ridership and the riding public. We will also be going to the boards of directors and the transportation committee at SANDAG with updates, modeling and analysis as part of this process, and certainly seeing those trends in future ridership as to any kind of fare changes would have. Ultimately, MTS and NCTD boards would consider any kind of potential fare changes, have to approve that. And then if those approvals are done at the operator level, then it would go to SANDAG Transportation Committee for final approval. Our timeline right now, we just got done with our first phase of outreach to our riders, and Tim's going to talk a little bit about that. Next step, we're going to do another phase of outreach and talk more to our riders about specific fare scenarios. If we were to adjust fares in any direction, what would that look like, and get some reactions from the public that way through some stakeholder outreach meetings. Then in the spring is kind of our timeline to when this would come back to the board of directors for possible action. And then if any kind of a fare change approval was done, when would this actually go to the public? It would be no sooner than July 1st, 2026. So most likely sometime between the summer and the fall is when we would look to implement fare changes. And now I'll hand it over to Tim to talk a little bit about our phase 1 outreach efforts.
Great. Thank you, Mark. And thank you, MTS board, for having me here today. So just kind of like why is SANDAG involved in this? Just to kind of start, SANDAG has the regional comprehensive fare ordinance and has the authority to set the regional fare policy. So that applies for both the MTS and the NCTD service area. So any kind of fare changes that require rewriting the fare ordinance, SANDAG is going to be involved, and we collaborate with both transit operators in terms of doing the outreach, doing the data analysis, and really working together to inform all of you on proposed changes, potential changes. So we did a survey recently. I'll back up and say one of the things that we do on an ongoing basis, so every 5 years at SANDAG, is we do an onboard transit rider survey. We do that every 5 years, so we're really tracking the patterns of rider demographics, travel patterns over time, and that's really important. We use it for a number of things, including developing our regional transportation plan, our regional plan, and part of that is doing a specific model for that. It also helps us know just who the demographics, who the riders are. So we do a statistically significant sample. We collect we collect information on all of the routes throughout the region, so we really have a good idea of who the riders are using the system. What we don't do with that survey is ask people about their preferences when it comes to fare policies. So it's a great survey, but we can't ask every single question that we would want to ask. So we did another survey through this process. Specifically, we did it in the fall between October 6th and November 7th, where we specifically wanted to talk to people about what their fare policy preferences were, asking people about the trade-offs. So we wanted to educate them about the process and understand kind of how they would assess those trade-offs between the service levels that the transit operators are providing. So for example, how frequently the buses come, the trolleys come, how late in the day, that sort of thing, versus the cost to ride, so the fare that they would have to pay. This is not a statistically significant sample that we collected with this one. It's a little bit, it's a relatively smaller effort compared to that larger one. So we don't have, 100% certainty that this represents our riders as a whole. With that said, we did collect more than 5,700 responses over a month, which is a lot of responses, and really, big credit to the MTS and NCTD for doing a lot of advertising. There were advertisements, through the newsletters. It was on the trolley station platforms. There was a lot of social media posts to get people to take the survey. We also were doing in-person outreach at the transit centers throughout the region. So we got a lot of responses, which is really great. Yeah, that's that. And then we also did a survey. We asked a bunch of questions, and I'll get into the responses here in a moment. But we also convened the Community Advisory Committee, which is MTS kind of body that has already existed before, tap into every once in a while for some kind of like focus group type feedback sessions. So we met with the group on November 19th, and we had 20 participants in that group. And these are representatives from community-based organizations, business and civic groups, transit, environmental advocacy groups. And so it's it's not the broad range, but it is like a chance to have a more focused discussion with a smaller number of people. So we included the responses from that group as well. All right, so now we're into the draft survey results. Since I'm saying draft, we haven't finalized. We're going to release a report that goes into detail, fully cleaned up data, but this is basically final, so you can feel good about these numbers. So I mentioned we got 5,700 responses, and it's not a statistically representative sample. With that said, so we got a good representation of ages, annual household incomes, different demographics in terms of who. At race and ethnicity, the number of household size, number of vehicles available per household. We didn't include youth responses in this survey, just because those riders, since we're asking about trade-offs between cost to ride and other things, youth have been riding pretty much for free through the YOP Youth Opportunity Pass program for several years. And so asking them to assess the trade-offs, we decided not to focus on them at the moment, but we have YOP surveys. We've done that in the past, and we plan on doing another one in a couple of years, or in a year or two. So there are other ways we plan to hear from youth riders. But as you can see, a wide range. And yeah. So we asked respondents how often they ride transit. We wanted to make sure that we were hearing from frequent riders, as well as maybe some occasional riders who might be enticed to use why we want to hear from them and why they're not using transit as much, for example. So one of the things we asked was how often they ride transit, how many days per week. If you look at the survey respondents, that's in purple on the left chart. You can see that the most common response is people riding 5 days a week. So that's a lot of frequent riders, and that actually matches up pretty closely with what we see in the onboard survey. So that's pretty representative. Community advisory committee members, not quite as frequent, but again, this is also a pretty small sample size, only 20 people. So we don't expect that it's going to match up exactly with this much larger sample. And we also asked people which transit service they ride the most often. And this is important for understanding, the different transit services. Some of them have different prices. Bus and trolley is the same. Coaster, for example, is different. The MTS rural services are different price. So we wanted to, based on these responses, it helps us understand the types of fares that people are paying on a regular basis. And so the number of survey respondents, as well as the community advisory committee, see almost 90% people are using the MTS bus and trolley most frequently. And that actually matches up pretty closely with what we see on region-wide ridership. MTS accounts for most of the ridership there. We asked respondents to consider the trade-off between maintaining transit services. So I mentioned frequency, span of service, things like that, versus the cost to ride or the transit fare. So the question was, thinking about transit cost and the transit service you use, what would you rather have? Less transit service with no change in cost, or the same level of transit with more cost to ride? So basically asking people to assess service cuts versus paying a bit more in fares. And so we found that a majority of respondents at all of the income levels included in our survey responded that they would rather have the same level of transit service with more cost to ride. So indicating that more riders would rather have that than have service cut. So you can see that that's a slight majority of 52% of riders at the lowest income category. So that's the $14,999 or less, but all the way up to 84% of respondents in the highest income category. And also note that 100% of the community advisory committee attendees selected that they would rather have the same level of transit service with a higher fare. So on this slide, we have more feedback about fare policy preferences. So we presented in this section a statement and asked respondents to say how much they agreed with the statement. So from strongly disagree all the way up to strongly agree. First chart in red and purple shows responses to the statement, if fares increase, it's better to increase only the cost for one-way and day passes. The most common response from 28% of respondents was neither agree nor disagree. So not really strong feelings one way or the other on this question, on this statement. The second chart on the right in light blue and orange shows responses to the statement, if fares increase, it's better to increase only increase costs for monthly passes. And we found that the most common response from respondents in the survey was disagree. And then it's more on the strongly disagree to neither when it comes to the community advisory committee respondents. And this is really interesting, but like we know that, as Mark mentioned, there's the fare capping functionality here in the San Diego region. So one-way and monthly passes, they really work together. If you increase, the one-way fare, for example, but you keep the monthly pass where it is, you're going to get more riders hitting that monthly cap, and you're not getting any more revenue from those riders. Whereas if you increase the monthly but keep the one way the same, then that's going to have a different effect on ridership. So one of the things we're going to be looking at in the next couple of months is how proposed specific scenarios, how they're estimated to affect both fare revenue and ridership. But the main thing is that it's not a linear relationship, because the price that people pay depends on how much they ride. And then the third chart on the bottom in green and dark blue shows responses to the statement, if fares got more expensive, it would be better to increase the cost over time rather than all at once. And we saw in general that there was support for this statement. 35% of respondents selecting strongly agree, and then 37% saying agree. Interestingly, 30% of the Community Advisory Committee respondents selected strongly disagree to this statement, but don't have a great explanation for that. I'm chalking it up to small sample size, and I wish we could have asked for more detail on why that is, but that's an interesting one. But the way that we expect that this could happen is basically we would identify a proposed or a potential kind of ultimate fare scenario. So for example, we've got $72 is the one-way or the monthly pass right now. So let's say, the goal was to get to $90 in 2 years. So we would study that, we would bring that to, to the board for consideration. And then maybe there would be an implementation schedule for that. So maybe it goes up to $80 after, in 1 year, and then the following year it would go up to 90, just to kind of blunt the impact of the increase. So it's not hitting all at once. So we definitely saw in the survey respondents that there was a preference for that, and that was a discussion at the SANDAG Transportation Committee, and I think it was discussed here in a prior meeting as well. And then one more slide, we've got feedback on fare discount preferences, and this is also something to consider, especially as I mentioned, one of the things we're going to be looking at the model is the amount of revenue that's going to be changing as a result of any potential changes in fare revenue. So obviously, if you're providing discounts, that's not as much revenue as you would collect otherwise. But there's trade-offs, of course. So we wanted to ask people the trade-off about providing fare discounts for some groups, even if that means that other riders need to pay more. So the first chart in dark blue and orange shows responses to the statement, it's important to keep fares the same for senior and disabled riders, even if other riders have to pay more. And we saw that there was support in the strongly agree and agree response from both the survey respondents as well as the Community Advisory Committee. The second chart in green and purple shows responses to the statement, it's important to keep fares free for youth, even if other transit riders have to pay more. And we saw that also there was a response, agree and strongly agree respondents from that one. But I'll point out that since we didn't have youth riders as part of our survey population, those aren't included here. And so that might explain why there's maybe less support for that particular discount compared to the SDM, the Senior Disabled Medicare. And then the third chart on the bottom in red and light blue shows responses to the statement. It's important to keep fares the same for low-income riders, even if other transit riders have to pay more. And the most common response on this one was strongly agree, and then agree was right there with it. And Community Advisory Committee responses were similar. So we've got three kind of like categories of fare discounts here. The Senior Disabled Medicare does exist. Mark mentioned what the fare is on that already. And that's also included in the Transnet ordinance, kind of written in already. And then some of the Transnet funding actually helps to subsidize these fare discounts. The youth fares are currently free through the Youth Opportunity Pass pilot program through the end of fiscal year 26. However, there's a funding strategy that the SANDAG Board of Directors has approved to keep that going for a few more years. And we're also looking for additional state revenue that might help to pay for that. And then there's no low-income fare discount at the moment. And so this would, this would be something that would need to be created if so directed. But we wanted to include the question because we heard from some MTS board members in prior discussions, this is something that there was interest in. And so we've got the results here for consideration. But another thing to consider is that there's certainly some overlap in these groups. Some of the respondents, for example, some folks who are already qualifying for the Senior Disabled Medicare discount, some of those also have low incomes. And so some of these folks were already serving through existing discount programs. And I know Mark mentioned a few things at the beginning, some of these youth riders and other folks who have the college discounts available. So some of these folks who might be served by low income already have access to a different sort of discounted or a free fare program. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark to just finish out with the next steps.
All right, thank you, Tim. So just one slide on the next steps. So as Tim mentioned, we're going to be looking at various scenarios, and we will be bringing those scenarios out to the public to get some more feedback as part of a phase 2 of outreach. We will be hosting community workshops, and we will go back out to our transit centers to talk to riders about some more specific scenarios. And from there, you know, like I mentioned in the timeline, we may be coming back to the board in spring with those results and tell you more about what the community has to say and possible action. So with that, love to open it up for questions, comments as we move forward in this process.
All right, thank you both. Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
We have no public comments, Chair.
Okay, we'll open board discussion on this item, and it's an informational item, so no motion is necessary. We'll begin our conversation with Director Downey.
I just had a question. Since we don't currently do a low-income fare, I'd be concerned we're going to get into some of the issues of how somebody qualifies for that. So when you bring it back, could you just give me some idea how that would happen?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I forgot to say, thank you very much. I have to tell you, reading this packet, the slides were so easy to understand and the questioning was right on what we would have asked. So I've seen so many of these survey ones. This is one of the best I've seen. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Downey. Director Moreno.
Thank you for the comprehensive fare study and for the extensive public outreach that went into this work. This is an important conversation because fares don't just impact revenue. They directly impact who can access transit, how often people ride, and whether we grow or whether we lose ridership. My core concern is that raising fares risks undermining our broader goal of increasing ridership. We know that fare increases disproportionately impact working class riders, low-income families, seniors, students, and people who rely on transit every day, especially in communities that I represent in the city of San Diego. If our goal is to get more people out of cars and onto transit, pricing people out is absolutely not the way to do that. The survey results are telling. They're very telling. They're telling a lot of important information. Across income levels, riders consistently prioritize maintaining service levels over paying more. There's also strong support for keeping fares stable for seniors, disabled riders, low-income riders, and youth, even if others were asked to pay for more. That was pretty neat to see. Fare revenues, was another thing that was a little shocking to me. Fare revenues represent about 20% of the operating budget, but the downside risk of fares increasing is significant. And I think the survey showcased that. If higher fares lead to lower ridership, we could actually lose revenue while also losing the public's trust. Once riders leave the system, it's much harder and more expensive to bring them back. So before we look to riders to close budget gaps, we need to be aggressive about every other option available to us. Federal grants, state grants, new and expanding operating subsidies, non-fare revenue sources like advertisement and partnerships, and when appropriate, regional or ballot-based funding solutions that don't fall directly on riders. I think riders should not be treated as the first and easiest lever to pull. I do want to acknowledge and thank staff for continuing the best fare model, fare capping and free youth passes. Those policies deeply matter and they're helping families stretch every single dollar these days. And as we move into phase 2 and scenario development, I will be looking closely at options. Obviously, the youth opportunity passes, protecting our most vulnerable riders, support ridership growth, and prioritize long-term sustainability without balancing the budget on the backs of transit-dependent communities. Transit is a public good, and if we want people to ride more, we have to make it affordable, reliable, safe, and accessible. One of the things that I wanted to point out, you showed us a slide about the current MTS fares and how they compare to other transit agencies and in the next, I think you're going into phase 2, if we could get a breakdown of how many people they move compared to how many people we move, I think that would be very insightful. And also, I would love to see what they're paying their bus and trolley operators compared to what we're paying our bus and trolley operators. So I appreciate the work thus far. I look forward to continuing this conversation with ridership growth as our guiding principle and also equity as our guiding principle. But thank you for the presentation.
Thank you, Director Moreno. Director Ela Rivera.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the presentation here and all the work that went into putting the study together. There's a couple things that I think were interesting here. One thing that does stand out and would be helpful, and this is super clear, I just in the future is kind of summarizing what the agree plus strongly agree and strongly disagree plus disagree amounts to. It can seem like something isn't, let's use as an example, keeping youth fares, or no, even better, keeping fares same for senior and disabled Medicare, even if others pay more. When you look at agree plus strongly agree on that, it's a pretty big number. So it just, again, just I think useful for us to have those combined numbers. Similarly, the strongly disagree plus disagree on something like increasing fares better to increase my price of monthly passes. Along those lines, it'd be helpful to see this again when we hear the next when the next conversation comes here. If I'm understanding correctly, we'll be running scenarios for fare changes. While we're doing that, have you all been able to think of any new creative opportunities for non-fare revenues? Or kind of doubling, it doesn't have to be new. I shouldn't necessarily ask it that way. Or are there things that we want to lean into even more that we're currently doing?
Yeah, I think certainly we're looking to grow that program, and we did come to the board, I think it was last year, with some opportunities that we're looking at. So we are working with like Clear Channel Outdoor and some of the other outdoor advertising companies to expand our billboard program. So those are the main things in the advertising portfolio that we're looking at. And we are expanding our bus bench and bus shelter portfolio as well, which means we can advertise on those and generate more non-fare revenue from that. So we're going to expand that program over the next 5 years into some cities that we've reached MOUs with. So particularly with Chula Vista and El Cajon. So we will be expanding that portfolio as well. Those are two things that we're working on.
When we brought the strategy to the board last month, we did discuss that as one leg of the whole strategy. So this fare study is just one component of that overall strategy that the board approved.
Appreciate that. It definitely would be helpful to see them next to each other when we're having these conversations. I think it gives us it could give us a better sense of what's actually possible on those fronts. And we need to fund the system. I think I heard Councilmember Moreno say what others have said, which is, if we have to do it, we have to do it, but I want to know it's the last option. And without knowing that those other options have been fully explored, we can't know that it's the last option. I also do think that it's useful to communicate some of this to our riders. And I would like us to think about ways that we're communicating about how we're trying to resource the system and keep fares down. I have not noticed, and maybe I'm missing it, we're not using any screens in vehicles, either trolley cars or buses. That's correct?
Yeah,
right?
we're piloting that right now on the trolley.
Oh, there are some. Okay, I haven't seen them. And how's that going?
The screens work really well. We're developing a plan to actually start advertising and generate revenue over that.
Yeah.
But until we deploy it to the entire system, it won't be really any kind of impact on the budget challenges that we're having. You know, I think right now it's on 10 vehicles. And so we have about 24 screens on there. And so we are working with our advertising partner to, you know, get more advertising on there as part of their packages of other advertising assets that they're putting out there for us. So I think, yeah, it's something that we can do, but it's going to take a few years. And I think, you know, we can get there.
Why would it take that long?
Because we have to go out for an RFP and order the equipment and put it on. So I think it'll probably be 1 to 2 years before, you know, I think we could get that really off the ground and start generating more revenue off that. And again, when you're looking at a $120, $145 million deficit, you know, I mean, if we can gather $1 to $2 million a year from those onboard monitors, that'd be great, right?
Yep.
But you know, we're looking at a much bigger challenge than that.
Understood. And you know, I'm just one member of this board, but I think that if we're doing things like that, and let's just use the screen as an example, and as part of what's displayed, we are explaining to folks that the revenue from, you know, the advertising on this screen is helping keep fares down. I think there's just an opportunity there because I think as a city, as a region, we don't do a very good job of explaining to the everyday people how we are resourcing the services that they expect, that they deserve. And I think there's an opportunity to do both, and just connecting the dots that running the MTS system requires a lot of resourcing, and we're trying to pull those from wherever we can. I think there could be some value in that. Again, I'm just one member of the board, but hope that that's something that we can continue to have conversations about. Thank you again for the work on this. Absolutely, this is a conversation we need to have. The last question is, the next time we ask these questions, it might be interesting to ask folks what else they'd be comfortable with, and if it meant, you know, having marginal, again, not fully funding the system, but would you be open to having additional advertising on our buses and our trolleys if it meant, you know, helping keep fares down or something along those lines? Useful for information for us, and then probably useful information for everyone who takes the survey to connect the dots that, again, like, these are things that we're doing to try to address keeping fares where they're at. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Ela Rivera. All right, this was an informational item, so no motion is necessary. Again, we are going to defer items 14 and 15 until our January meeting. Item 16, any board member or CEO communications? Yes.
If I might, I just wanted to let you know that Tim Curran, who has been our Director of Passenger Safety and Transit Security, is retiring tomorrow. He says this time it's for good. We'll see how that works out. So I just wanted to recognize him. And we have, after a national search, we chose Dan Brislin to be his replacement as director. Some of you know Dan as the deputy director for our passenger safety and transit security. So Dan will be stepping in on Saturday.
Very good. Well, congratulations to both of them. Let's go to Director Fernandez.
Yes, thank you very much. I heard earlier Director Bush talk about an art project there in National City. In a previous meeting, I've heard Director Moreno talk about her happiness with a large art project over there off of, I think, Bayer. I just want to highlight the fact that that we use local artists. I love that. National City is choosing to go with Vision Culture. They're an organization that works with kids in schools in National City and in Chula Vista. They do amazing work. I know we've used Mr. B Baby in Chula Vista and over there in South San Diego. She's a Bonita High grad, local. I love it. We use Ground Floor, in Oceanside, right, for a big NPS project out there. Also local to Chula Vista. Love it. I also want to say, recognize the fact that I use transit out of convenience. I ride here in the morning to avoid the traffic. Padre games, SCFC, same thing. Others rely on us. And hearing the comments from speakers today and previous meetings, we had one young man facing significant challenges come to 2 of our meetings. And we don't know if there was ever any resolution to that, any fix. I think it was like 0.3 of a mile to get to where he needed to be. And early in my tenure, I didn't know how to handle this either. Somebody emailed me and said, hey, I'm trying to get to work off of Main at what is the Sesame Place? And he just needed a little bit more to get there. Significant challenges. And I sent it to you all, but I don't really know if there was a resolution. And I just want to go on record right now saying, can we get some kind of information from staff if there was or was not some kind of help provided to these folks? So thank you.
Thank you, Director Fernandez. Let's go to Director Hall.
Just want to congratulate our CEO, Sharon Cooney, for 20 years at MTS.
Thank you, Director Hall. Chair Pro Tem Montgomery Stepp.
Yeah, I was hidden in the magazine, so. I want to say thank you to Tim. I had some comments earlier about public security, and you have been at the helm of a lot of that, and also working even when you didn't have your role as the leader of it, working to make sure that we have a safe line that is treats people with dignity and respect. So thank you so much, and congratulations to you, and good luck on your next chapter, and congratulations to Dan. I would also just like to agree with Member Fernandez about the comments that we heard and the follow-up. I really, really believe that we should be wholly dedicated to our community of non-choice riders, but specifically the disabled community, where I think just we have an obligation above all other things to make sure that no matter the cost, that we are making our transit lines comfortable and accessible. Not only is it the law, we can, that's a strict liability there, but it's also the right thing to do. So thank you to all who came out. I just wanted to put a button on that.
Thank you, Chair Pro Tem Montgomery Stepp. Seeing no further comments from the board, I will simply echo the congratulations for Mr. Curran. We have made significant strides during your tenure here, so thank you for your service, and please do enjoy your retirement. All right, we have a closed session item. It is a conference with legal counsel regarding existing litigation. Clerk, do we have any public comment on the closed session item?
No public comments, Chair.
Okay, with that then, the board's next meeting date is January 15th at 9 o'clock in the morning, and we will now move into closed session.
Hi, this is Samantha Leslie, Deputy General Counsel for MTS, reporting out of closed session for item 19. This is closed session conference with legal counsel regarding existing litigation pursuant to California Government Code Section 54956.9 D1 relating to Angela McGaff et al. Versus MTS et al. Board received a report from legal counsel and gave instructions.
Meeting has adjourned at 12:07 p.m.